All right, welcome to this week's version of the Money Puzzle. I'm the same guy that I was last week, and that's the same guys we were last week. We did not wear the same thing 2 weeks in a row. Although I do wear this a lot, but
I'm the same guy I was about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. Because we did record last week's show about 10 minutes ago, so we do them multiple at a time. Anyway, all right. So today's topic is, again, just like last week, and just like almost every week, where we sit down on a weekly basis and say, okay, what topics are we hearing from either clients or prospective clients? And we sort of take those topics kind of round robin around in the room on Monday mornings, and we say, okay, we come up with some topics. So last week, if you didn't get you get a chance to take, it is Friday afternoon. Make sure you go back and check that out. We talked about just seeking advice from non-professionals and how that can, be disastrous in some cases, but not always in your best interest. This week, we're talking about not necessarily about estate planning, but sort of beneficiary designations and the importance of making sure you check that. And I will tell you, what the stories we're getting ready to tell are all stories that are coming from meetings that we've had over the last several weeks with clients that unfortunately have either passed away or have had parents that have passed away, or something's happened where a beneficiary came into play. That is why we set out years and years and years and years ago, and when we created the client experience, we have a dedicated meeting every single year to talk about beneficiaries. It is a specific meeting on the calendar. Every client knows about it, and we're going to talk about beneficiaries. I've not once, and I've been doing this for a long, long time, especially having these specific meetings, I've not once had any client ever say to me, why do you do this? Mm-hmm. Most of the time they go, I appreciate you doing this because there is a change for some, whatever reason. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to sort of round robin this between the two of us, and we're going to go back and forth and tell some stories. But we hope that you guys see something in these stories that say, okay, I know someone that needs to hear this, or maybe we need to hear this, or maybe me and my spouse need to sit down and talk about this, or maybe we need to spend the weekend or the week going through our beneficiaries to make sure that they're accurate. So that's what we hope you get out of it. But anyway, some of these stories may resonate that may be in your situation, or you know somebody, and that's why we do these shows. So,
yeah.
Eric, you got
Want me to go first? Yeah, I'll go first. So I have two stories specifically, but I'll start with one and send it back to you. So my two stories are really going to be centered around consolidation of accounts and making your estate far more simple prior to you passing away, obviously. So the first case, I've got a client who unfortunately is in a memory care facility with dementia. It's not even so much early onset at this point. And so my relationship really at this point is with the power of attorney. It's not even with him so much anymore. So he's in a memory care facility. His wife, he never really shared with his wife what types of accounts they had, how much. She had no clue how much money. It was actually kind of interesting to be part of the conversation when she found out how much money she was actually worth. That was a very interesting conversation. It was kind of very eye-opening for her because she just always kind of had everything and everything was there, but she really never knew any of the nuts and bolts behind everything that they had. But in essence, this individual client, he was a DIYer for the vast majority of his, well, really pretty much the entirety of his life until the very end. When he started realizing, okay, I need some help, I'm starting to go a little bit. And so he had a Lloyd's of London account overseas. He's got gold coins. He's got silver coins. He's got a different other coin collection. He's got real estate. He's got all types of different accounts. He's got, I think, 5 or 6 insurance policies. There is stuff everywhere. Okay. And unfortunately, the position that we're in right now is because he's no longer able to do any of this himself. Everything has fallen on his POA, his power of attorney, to unwind everything that he spent a lifetime putting together in all of these different places. And so I've got most of the investment accounts at this point, but we had irrevocable trust, we had individual accounts, we had retirement accounts, we had all types of different accounts for both he and his wife as well, plus some other family money and some money that's already put in a trust. And so understanding the purpose of, they had 3 different trusts. They had an irrevocable, and then they each had a living trust for each one of them. And there's also a trust that owns their real estate as well. And then there's also a life insurance trust. So his estate plan was basically a patchwork of things that he had put together, and he's the kind of guy, he would read an article about a stock and, I'm going to go buy some of that.
Yep.
So we had stock accounts with literally 150, 200 different stocks or holdings within an individual account. No rhyme or reason to any of it, right? And so once again, going back to the idea of consolidation and just making things far more simple, most of what he was doing really wasn't of benefit to his overall portfolio, or it wasn't any more beneficial than just a traditional types of investments would have been. But he had, I don't know if it was, I don't want to say vanity, but sometimes there is a prevailing thought that people might have that the more complicated something is, the better an investment it is. And 99 times out of 100, that's just not the case. It's really, really not. And so we're stuck, and this has been a long process, and we're still undergoing it, unwinding all these other different things that he's done and trying to make sure that everything gets done before he passes away. Because once he passes away, we're going to have some other tax consequences. Things are going to kick into the trust, and it's going to lead to a whole other host of events or a whole other sequence of events that's going to occur upon his passing. And we are a little bit on the clock now because, once again, he's in a facility, and he still probably can hang on for another couple of years, but we don't know that for a fact. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. So consolidation and simplicity is far more valuable within an estate plan than really we can even talk about here. It's so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll give you another one. So we had a client who is a client of mine who his father passed away. Hey, that's one of our clients right there walking down the hallway. Anyway, so what we did, so he passed away about a month ago. And so his son came in, who's my client, and said, all right, let's sort of walk through everything. He's the only child. So we started walking through everything. I had told him, have your dad come in. I'm happy to do, sort of, kind of review if you want. And he was like, no, I think, he says he's got everything under control. And then all of a sudden he passes away. We start going through every account and saying, okay, let's call to see if you're a beneficiary because he's the only child. Mm-hmm. And we get to the second one we called, which was an IRA that he had with a bank here in town. And lo and behold, guess who was the primary beneficiary? His mother. Okay, makes sense?
Yeah.
His mother passed away 6 years ago. And who was the contingent beneficiary? Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. So I'm like, he's like, what do I do? And I go, that's a probate item.
Yep.
So then we went down to the next one. That was fine. Went to the next one. Was like a money market account kind of thing at an insurance company. So he either somehow accumulated this in his life, and we call, passed away. It was under his name only, no beneficiary. He's like, what do I do? And I go, well, that's a probate item. And so it should have been so simple to have someone review his beneficiaries to make sure that his son was on the IRA as a contingent, and actually should have been cleaned up a long time ago after his mom passed away. That's a whole different story. Mm-hmm. But even if he was contingent, it would have been fine, but he wasn't. And then he had this checking account that his son knew about, but just didn't know that he had to put a TOD on it, or a POD, meaning that it would have passed outside of probate. So he just didn't know to really ask for it. And lo and behold, now we got items that we got to send through probate. It's above the $30,000 mark, which is a simplified probate request. So now you have to go through full probate for two small accounts that are like $45,000 total. So again, that is specifically why we have a meeting dedicated every single year to talk about beneficiaries and other estate work and that sort of thing. So it's that important. If it wasn't that important, we wouldn't have a dedicated meeting for it. But it is that important, and that's why we have that particular meeting. Yeah. You got another one?
I do. So this is a current client, and he's 80. He's mid-80s. I don't remember the exact day. I want to say 85 or 86. Mid-80s. Actually, you would never know it by looking at him. He was just in the office this week actually dropping off a check for something, but just catching up with him a little bit. He's been a client for years. Wonderful guy. Love the guy to death, but he is super old school. And in his mind, he kind of puts everything in boxes. So he has this over here, and that's just, he compartmentalizes, right? And that's just what he's always done. So he still has an old 401k from when he retired 20 years ago. and it's just still sitting out there, and he doesn't want to consolidate it with his IRA, just because to him that's his 401k. That's what that does over there, right? And to him, it's separate from his IRA, even though they're really one and the same. He's got a special needs daughter. He's a widower. He's got a special needs daughter. She's in her 50s, and so we've done the trust work, right? There's a special needs trust in place, and everything's going to flow through the special needs trust. But he still has outside of that 401k, he's got another account out there. He's also sitting on. He sold some real estate, so he's got a lot of cash, and he's sitting on a fairly significant amount of cash in his account. And so going back to what you were just talking about, having a TOD on your accounts, I asked him again, have you put a TOD on that checking account yet, or on the savings account? No, I still need to do that. Yeah. He even mentioned to me this week when we were having a conversation, I'm starting to have those what if thoughts. And I'm like, well, the ones we've been talking about for the last couple of years, because where he's at right now, if something were to happen to him, and he's in pretty good health, I don't think anything's going to happen to him immediately, but he's at that age where what if something did happen to him? Yep. He's got that 401k separate from his IRA. I can't help him with that. When he passes away, I can't help his daughter with that. There's nothing I can do to get access to that money, to those funds, to make sure that they go to where they need to go. Same thing with the money in that savings account. There's nothing I can do, and if the TOD is not listed, on the account, it's not going to avoid probate. It's going to go through probate. Life is going to become significantly more difficult and it's not even going to be his daughter in this case. It's going to be for the executors of his will, for the trustees of the special needs trust, who are some kind of distant family members, because his daughter is not in a position to be able to take care of these things herself. So he's going to be relying on third parties, to some degree disinterested third parties who aren't even going to stand to benefit directly from what they're going to have to do to make sure everything gets to the right place. And so I keep coming back, and every time I see him, I have these conversations. Are we ready to do something with these accounts? Are we ready to consolidate these accounts? Are we ready to clean up your estate? Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and and he knows he needs to do it, but he's just so slow to make a decision. That's just the way that his brain works. He overanalyzes things, but I'm trying to get him to. I'm trying to avoid what could be a potential far bigger issue after he passes away, and only he can take care of that while he's still alive.
Yeah, those are people called reluctant learners.
Yeah,
They just don't figure it out. Until in some cases too late. So here's another reason why when we were sitting in the meeting, we were talking about just different stories that had to do with beneficiaries. And I mean, we got a blue million of them. If you've ever been to any of our adult financial literacy programs, you've probably heard me tell the story about, a life insurance policy of a doctor who's very well known in town, had his first wife on the policy. And he'd been married 40 years or something, and we had to give the life insurance proceeds to the first wife because he never checked it. But it's one thing to have the wrong person on there. It's another thing to not understand the consequences of someone that you list as a beneficiary. And I'm going to give you an example. And Chris, who's kind of eagle-eyed and standing right there, I feel awkward because I know I'm going to get this story incorrect, and he's going to blow a gasket. Because if you know Chris, that's him.
Oh, I hope get it right. Yeah, I know the story too.
But the interesting thing is, so it's important to understand how to transfer money, and that's one of the conversations we have when we talk about estate work, which again is a specific meeting we have every year. We talk about that kind of thing, and when we do estate work, we specifically have those conversations of who's going to benefit from this money? Where do all the assets need to go? How do they need to be transferred to the next generation? Do we need to protect the beneficiaries? And I will tell you that for the most part, you're going to do yourself a lot of good by using a trust to benefit younger people. Now, in the case of me, if my parents and I'm 50-something years old, and we still used a trust. I was like, yes, absolutely, transfer whatever you got left in a trust. And I'm 50 and my older sister's 60. So I didn't see anything wrong with that. That's why I recommend it to my parents. But it's the same thing when you have parents that want to benefit, let's say, a grandchild, which is what we're talking about in this particular case. Grandmother had an insurance policy, correct? I know he's going to be like, I don't know, dude. That may not be correct. No, but it was grandmother had an insurance policy, and none of the family really knew who she had for the beneficiary. She passes away. They go get this life insurance policy, and the grandmother had listed the grandchild as beneficiary.
As the sole beneficiary.
As the sole beneficiary.
Sole beneficiary.
That's not that unusual, other than this grandchild is almost 2 years old. And so there becomes this complexity that we literally had a little challenging conversation around was what actually ultimately happens to that money? Because now the money ultimately goes to this 2-year-old, but do the parents, can they do anything with that? If they have other children, can it benefit the other kids? I mean, there's all kinds of complexity there. Had they just listed a trust and said any offspring of, the kids would have been totally fine, or they could have given to the parents outright. So, and I'm sure there was some weird family complexity there that said this is why it never went to, bypassed the kids and went to the grandchild. But again, that is something that if you don't review on a regular basis and you're not seeking advice from a professional, you can make a mistake like that. And now there's all kinds of complexity to try to figure out what happens. And
her intentions were good.
Well, her intentions
were good. She wanted to leave the money to the grandkids. She thought, well, my kids don't need the money. They're doing okay. I'd rather benefit the grandkid. Well, that's great, except your grandchild's 1.5 years old.
Yeah, and think about what's that $100,000 going to be when the child turns 18 in the state of Kentucky, when they ultimately get the money, or unless somebody intervenes and does something the proper way. But nothing happens. That $100,000 could be $300,000, $200,000. I mean, whatever the number is, and giving that much money to an 18-year-old, not a good idea. Maybe there's, I don't know. I just never, in 20 years, have I ever seen that turn out to be successful. Maybe there is one, and maybe somebody could call in and say, well, I was one of those. But amen to you.
The car dealership's going to benefit nicely, though.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, exactly. So, you got another story, or?
No, those are the two main ones, and we're probably getting pressed for time. But I mean, I think that at the end of the day, I mean, you want to be focused on making sure that you're setting up your portfolio in a way that it's going to be simple to pass on to the next generation. And there's a number of different ways to do it. Consolidation of accounts, making sure your beneficiaries are in order, making sure the proper trust work has been done well ahead of time. The proper time to do estate planning is not when you need it. It's when you're thinking about it, when everyone's still alive, everyone's still healthy, everyone's still of sound mind, to really put some thought into making the proper decisions around where you want your money to go and who you want to inherit it.
Yeah. And look, if we didn't think that first of all, we think this topic is important enough that we do a podcast, and we've done multiple podcasts about estate planning in the past. But if we didn't think it was important, we wouldn't specifically have a meeting for a prospective client that is onboarding to be a client. We have a dedicated meeting that is all we do is talk about estate work and what it is you want to see your money go. Who do you want to benefit from it? When do you want it for them to receive it? That is a specific meeting that is on the calendar on the onboarding process that we dedicate to nothing but estate work. Then when a prospective client / onboarding a client, when they become a client, we go back and revisit that every single year, and a dedicated meeting happens between January and April of every year. We have a meeting that we specifically talk about beneficiaries and estate work and what happens, if something happens to either one of you. That is a dedicated meeting, and I will challenge you that if you're working with an advisor and they're not having this meeting every year and they're not dedicating time to talk to you about what your estate looks like and who your beneficiaries are, that's great. Come see us, because we do. Because it is that important for you to do that. And if your current advisor is not doing that, come see us, and I can promise you that we'll have that conversation every year. So, again, just check your beneficiaries. That's the biggest thing. We can't stress that enough. And just make sure you're doing that on an annual basis. Even if you don't change anything, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. That's the majority of the cases. But occasionally you'll need to change something. But you also want to make sure that you're looking at every single asset that has title so that you get it all right. And it all has to mirror. I'll give you another quick. It all has to make sure that your beneficiaries match what your estate work says. So as an example, you may have the best drawn out trust in the world that says exactly how you want money dispersed, and you can have $1 million life insurance policy that gives it directly to your kids. doesn't go to a trust, so they get the money outright. So all that work you just did totally gets bypassed because you don't have the right beneficiary on there. And that's happened multiple times. So you just have to make sure that everything works together. All the beneficiaries work together according to what it is that you want to see happen. If that works through a trust, everything has to go through the trust. So that's it for another week. I guess make sure that you watch each and every week. And we are looking for folks to subscribe to our podcast. So if you could do us a favor and subscribe to that podcast, that would be awesome. We're trying to get to I know we're like at 50 or 55. We're trying to get to 1,000. I know that sounds like, trying to, climb Mount Everest, in boxer shorts, but we're still trying to get to that point. So if you could help us out, that would be awesome. If you could tell your friends and family about us, that'd be awesome. We also have another podcast called the Bourbon Podcast. We don't really have a title for it, but it is on our YouTube page. It's also on our website, so make sure you tune into that, whatever you want to call it. We release all of our information on a weekly basis too. So any parting thoughts there?
Find the Money Puzzle on YouTube.
Yep.
Subscribe. There's a big red subscribe button. Can't miss it. Appreciate you listening on whatever platform you're listening on. If you're watching on YouTube, once again, appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button. Be the first to be notified whenever we drop any new content, and please feel free to share with any friends or family that you feel might benefit from anything that we had to say here. Appreciate it. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, IFP Securities, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. This report may not be reproduced, distributed, or published by any person for any purpose without IFP's express prior written consent. Securities offered through IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member of FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Advisors, doing business as IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Family Wealth Planning Partners are not affiliated. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as IFP, IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors.